not Kentucky yet, but maybe one day, Aaron, you can build one of these dream homes yourself once they get up there. It is Gershon, right?
You got it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make, I'm a big name guy. You got to get it right.
I appreciate that.
And so Aaron Gershon has been kind enough to join us to take a look at the other side of this thing from up there in the bluegrass, where they will welcome the Gamecocks to town. At least he'll kick off at 3:30 Eastern on ABC on a Saturday afternoon. Carolina looks to win their third in a row over Mark Stoops and the Wildcats. But, man, really, really do appreciate you. I know that you got a lot going on right now, so we won't keep you forever today. But I tell you what, for the first time ever, since any of us have been in media, we yesterday and today are able to wake up and talk about an injury report.
I know.
It's college football, right?
Yeah, it's nice. It is nice. It's something I've been begging for years, especially for me, it started against South Carolina 2 years ago, right? Where Will Levis, mystery injury. We saw, I think Kentucky was favored by 7.5. And then I think it was Thursday afternoon of that week, right before we were going to talk to Stoops. We always talk to him for a few minutes on Thursday. And all of a sudden the line goes to 2.5. And we're all like, what the hell happened? And sure enough, Will Levis was hurt. And they did a really good job of hiding it until the folks in Vegas uncovered it. So it's good, I think, for everybody. I know Shane Beamer's usually given a little injury report when I've listened to his press conferences, and then he'll probably go vague the rest of the week. But you know what? I don't blame him. That was what you were allowed to do. Mark Stoops was even worse when it came to injuries. He just would no comment on them. So good to have at least some clarity on, even though it's not like there's a designated injury, some clarity on guys that you have to at least monitor going into warmups on Saturday.
Nothing beat Muschamp when he was at South Carolina.
Yeah, what was his go-to?
He's got a toe.
Yeah, whatever was hurt, he just
he had a severed foot.
I hope he has 9 of them. The year he got fired, Xavier Legette, actually, he was a sophomore, and he was the number 2 receiver. That team didn't have very many receivers, and everybody's like, where did Legette go? Everybody just thought he just wasn't good enough to play, and Mike Bobo takes over. I think week 2, somebody finally asked about Xavier, and he's like, well, Xavier's a good player, but he's been out for the season since week 3. And you're like, man, that was pretty good. But
that's hilarious.
Well, and Shane said a week ago today in his call-in show last week, he said he was asked by Todd Ellis or the voice of Gamecock football what he thought about the injury reports, and Shane said, let's just be honest. This has to do with betting. We all know that.
Oh, he's spot on that, 100%.
Yeah. I mean, so it is what it is. So let's look at the Kentucky side of it. On Carolina's side, there were some names that popped up yesterday, but our information says Carolina is probably going to play all those guys who are questionable. They will be on the field.
Yep.
As far as the Wildcats go, I know that there were 6 dudes listed as out. You got a couple doubtful, and then DJ Walter Jr., the defensive back, he is questionable. How many of those guys are impact players for this team or would have been this weekend?
Yeah, so the guys that were out, none of them were surprises. I mean, Chip Traynham was supposed to be the starting running back for this team, but he got hurt in fall camp. All those other guys, Darian Henry-Young is coming off an ACL from last year. Cortland Ford's been out since spring practice. Hardly Gilmore, true freshman receiver, was going to play but got hurt in camp. And then Hayes and Gadsden have been out for the year as announced. So no surprises on the guys out or doubtful. Those guys, nothing really too serious there as far as production. And then, the probables, that's where you hope and assume those guys are going to be okay. Josh Caddis, the starting tight end, Keyshawn Silver, the starting nose tackle, and then Jamarian Wilcox is kind of part of that running back rotation. But Caddis didn't play last week as precaution, so that's not a surprise to see his name on there. The other 2, probably something popped up in the game last week. And then, DJ Waller's the one that is questionable and probably would be the one Kentucky hopes of the group to have back the most, because he's a guy that has a chance to be their second outside starting corner. That position battle is kind of still ongoing into the season. 6'3" guy with length. He's actually the number 1 corner at Michigan during spring practice spring practice, but he decided to transfer because Steve Clinkscale, his DB's coach that used to be at Kentucky, left and followed Harbaugh to the NFL. So hit the portal. He's a Youngstown, Ohio guy, and Kentucky was able to scoop him up. So I have heard he's practiced fully this week, and they expect to have him now.
All right. let's get to, let's not bury the lead here. Everybody wants to know about Brock Vandegrift and how he's doing. This is the third straight year of the transfer quarterbacks, fourth straight year with a new OC, but third consecutive because what was his name? Came back for the second time last year.
Liam
Cohen. So you got a new OC, new quarterback once again. How's that going?
Yeah, so far so good. I mean, you got to take into account the opponent was Southern Miss, and they were coming off a 3-9, and it was obviously only 3.5 or really two quarters and 5 minutes, but the offense was really starting to roll when the game got called. I thought, Brock Vandegrift, outside of 2 throws, he had a pick that was tipped. He kind of just stared down on one receiver. They read his eyes, did a good job, and then he had a pick that was dropped. Other than that, I thought was really, really impressive. I mean, talk about a guy who can get out of the pocket, and similar to Will Levis when we saw in 21, they kind of took the wheels off him in 22 to protect him. Where Scangarello, the OC that year, did that and made him the most hated man in Lexington, besides the point. But Vandegrift's the guy who's going to lower his shoulder, and he's not going to be afraid to go out and make the plays he has to. And I mean, second play from scrimmage, he goes and lowers his shoulder and picks up a first down on a 9-yard run. And he did it again on a 3rd and 8 run. So a guy who's, going to be able to go get what he needs, made some really nice plays on the run, including a touchdown to Marion Brown was a throw on the run. So, he's a guy that obviously was very well coached because he was at Georgia for 3 years, sat behind, a 2-time champion, Seston Bennett, possibly the number 1 pick in next year's draft, Carson Beck. You could see that in the way he prepares. You could see that in the way the coaches talk about him. Just a really guy who's not going to get too high or too low, and really impressive debut. And then as far as Bush Hampton, I think the important thing with Bush that makes him a little different from Scangarello and Cohen is he's a college guy. Like, they tried the NFL thing with those 2 guys. It worked in year 1, no doubt, with Liam Cohen, but in year 2, with Scangarello, it was a mess. And then last year, it was kind of more the same, where they just couldn't. They would snap the ball with 5 seconds left on the play clock or less. They just were so slow getting the line. So much verbiage in the offense, just guys couldn't pick it up. And I think Hampton, being more of a college guy who called plays at Boise State, where they were a top 25 unit last year, called plays for 3 games at Missouri, and they averaged 31 points per game at the end of the 22 season. I think he just kind of relates to the players better, and think they're simpler terms, and there is more tempo for sure. I'm not going to tell you they're Ole Miss or Tennessee, because they're not, but they are snapping the ball with 20 seconds left on the clock and getting more plays off. So I just think it's a more balanced unit. I think it's more, a college offense that they've been sorely missing around here. And, he's got some playmakers that, honestly, the depth they have at the wide receiver position is not something I don't think they've ever had under Mark Stoops. So, there's a lot to like, but obviously a big step up in competition from a defensive standpoint this week.
Yeah, trust me. Hopefully this year turns it around. And Dowell Loggins wasn't an NFL OC, in fairness. I mean, he had come back to college and tried to kind of reinvent himself. But they had a guy that was here that spent 1 year in the NFL, thought he's Andy Reid, and trust me,
that's just how it goes.
When Stoops fired the guy from 2022 and made the comment about I was surprised he hired Cohen back. Yeah. I thought Cohen was pretty overrated. I thought the 1 year he had a good year, and then everybody else was like, "Oh my God, Liam Cohen!" And
he had Wan'Dale Robinson and Will Levis playing that NFL level.
I would much rather have a guy from that Boise State tree.
Yeah,
we're seeing it at Missouri now with it was Kirby Moore, Kellen Moore's brother. And he took over for Eli Drinkwitz, who's a pretty good play caller. So I thought that was a very smart move by Mark Stoops. I thought that was kind of savvy, because it's still kind of what Stoops likes to do. He's still going to make you. He still wants you to run the ball, and he's still a defensive coach. But it's just it's a bit more creative, and it operates at a faster tempo. And I thought that was a solid hire.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, for sure. And they, like you said, I like that you made the point about running the ball. Bush Hampton, every year he's been a coordinator, whether it was at Boise or at UW Washington, he's had an 1,000-yard rusher. Now, I'm not sure that's going to happen this year, just because they are by committee with train them out. But I think if train them were healthy, it probably would have happened again this year.
Aaron, the Gamecocks last week had a fairly poor showing offensively against Old Dominion, stuck in neutral and reverse at times. And they're hoping to try to find a way to get it going this weekend up there in Lexington, where the last time they were there, Carolina ran for 179 yards in 2022 en route to that 24-14 victory. So Kentucky shuts out Southern Miss last weekend in that rain-shortened game. It was very odd with the weather. We had a little bit of a delay in Columbia too. I drove all the way back to Charleston, got the TV on, and they're in the second quarter. I'm like, did my TV pause? Like, what happened here? But here they are still playing. So you saw it. What did Southern Miss bring to the table? It didn't look like much, but what did they bring to the table? And what do you feel like anybody kind of learned about the Wildcats from that football game and specifically that Wildcat defense?
Well, I think we all kind of assumed going into this year the strength of this defense was going to be the front seven. I mean, you got probably 3 NFL guys, in that front seven. Deion Walker, we all know, is going to be a top 10 to 15 pick, if not sooner than that. Jamin Dumas-Johnson, transfer from Georgia, All-American in 22, kind of just got unlucky last year where he got hurt the last 3, but he was playing at a high level, gets hurt the last 3 games of the season, and they decide, they play these young kids and they were really, really good, and it's Georgia. So they weren't taking him off the field, and he decides to go elsewhere. But he's a guy who – it's not going to happen in Kentucky, but he's never lost a game as a starter. I think that's just a crazy stat. And then Derek Jackson, a guy who's been here for a couple of years as a starter at weak side linebacker, is a really, really good football player. So and then they've just got a lot of bodies on that defensive line. They can just – they're 2 or 3 guys deep of guys that they trust, whether it's Trayvon Ripka, Octavius Oxendine, Keyshawn Silver, Khalil Saunders. They've got dudes up front, and Southern Miss tried to run the ball every way possible. They tried a quarterback run. They tried outside zone, inside zone. They could not do anything on the ground, 5 yards rushing. So really impressive performance from that aspect. And then, the thing that going into the year that you worried about with this Kentucky defense was the cornerback play across the field from Maxwell Harrison. Maxwell Harrison, the starting corner, obviously their number 1 corner, had 5 picks last year, second team All-SEC, first team All-SEC preseason selection. You know what you're going to get from him. But it's finding a guy who's going to play well aside from him. And I thought JQ Hardaway passed that first test, but Southern Miss, their wide receiver core was made up of mostly SEC guys who never saw the field and then transferred to go and find playing time. So a little hard to gauge, but I thought JQ Hardaway played a nice game. They were definitely, they didn't hold him up. They held him off the scoreboard, but it wasn't perfect. The first, I think their second drive of the game, they converted a 3rd and 18, which that's how South Carolina beat Kentucky, obviously last year, a couple 3rd and longs that to Xavier Leggett was the difference in that game. And then they converted a 3rd and 8. So kind of the third down issues Kentucky had last year reared their ugly head early. And then, Kentucky adjusted and, held Southern Miss 0 for 5 on their last 5 third down attempts. So, a lot of good, but I definitely need to know, I definitely need to see more, from those corners that aren't named Maxwell Harrison before can fully be on board with it. But JQ Hardaway, Jansen Dunn, those guys definitely passed the initial test at least.
Gamecock fans still very frustrated with Kentucky for dropping that Gator Bowl to Clemson 38-35. They had as many fans in this state as they did in their own.
That was a brutal one. And it was that third down, man, 3rd and 18, a 16-yard completion to Stiello. And
do they feel like they've made progress there? I mean, Carolina last weekend really struggled on 3rd down. They're going to have to get some this week if they want to move the ball.
Yeah, no doubt. Look, it's hard to. That's kind of just I wonder how they drill that. Obviously, you can drill things in practice. They said they felt better about it. It's been the number 1 talking point all offseason with this defense. Every press conference with Brad White during the defensive coordinator during fall camp was how's 3rd down. So they obviously the first 3 third downs went 3 for 3 for Southern Miss. 1 was a 3rd and inches. So, you're not going to kill them too much for that. But 3rd and 18, unacceptable. 3rd and 8, unacceptable. But then from then on, they were stout. They held them 0 for 5 the rest of the game. So, we'll have to find out. It was all, I'll say this though, all those plays except for the 3rd and inches were through the air. And, they were picking on the second corner. One of them was a tight end screen. Then they just left them wide open. And then the other one, they beat Hardaway on it. So it's to beat Kentucky, you got to throw the ball. I think they're going to be a tough team to run on for anybody this year. I mean, Georgia struggled running the ball on them in 2022 when that run defense really started to take off later in the year. Last year, they were okay against the run, but, couldn't run it up the middle against them with Deion Walker and Octavius Oxendine the way he played at the end of the year. And then this year, I think with Dumas Johnson, they're really 4 deep at inside linebacker, and they play all those guys. It's just they are a tough unit to run the ball against, and to beat Kentucky, you got to make plays on the outside.
Aaron Gershon, it's 11:37 here on Inside the Gamecocks, the show. All right, a couple of things, off the field here. So I felt like personally, and you can absolutely rub it in my face and tell me that I'm wrong, but it just trying to read the tea leaves, man. After last season, and you had Coach Stoops kind of flirting with College Station and maybe jetting that way for A&M. I don't think we know the full story, but we at least know that there was some interest there. It didn't look like there was as much interest on the A&M side, but maybe on his camp, that's what it looks like. And then, he's been very vocal about things like NIL and transfer portals, and he's been testy at times. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really blame him at all.
No.
I actually understand exactly where he's coming from.
Sure.
But you don't see the emotion come out necessarily from coaches a lot. Maybe that's something to be appreciated about by him. But I felt coming into the year like maybe it could be a little fragile up there. Like if it starts going downhill, maybe it never comes back up. Is that fair? What's the state of the program?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this fan base wants an 8-4 at the very least, given what the schedule is. I mean, it's brutal. I mean, I don't think anyone's counting them to beat Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss, or probably even Tennessee with the way they struggle. It's kind of take care of the rest of the games they feel like they should win. But as far as Mark Stoops goes, look, he's definitely fed up with how the state of college sports. Kentucky, they're not in a bad spot NIL wise, but there's been a lot of work that Mark Stoops has had to do on his own that probably most college coaches don't. And I think that's why the A&M job was so enticing, because he would have had a lot less to do. He would have been able to just kind of go do what he loves, and that's coach and recruit, where the money kind of take care of itself. And I do think, the now former AD there, Ross Borchek, was definitely in on Stoops. The big money guys were not, and the fans were not, and that's why it ultimately collapsed. But I do think he was the AD's guy, just not everyone else's. So that's what happened there from my understanding of it. But yeah, look, he's in an interesting spot where he's the winningest coach in this program's history. He's done things that have never been done here before. The fan base will love him no matter what, but every marriage comes to an expiring point. I mean, look, John Calipari, they were getting ready to build a monument for him. And then the last 5 years, everyone wanted him gone, and now he is gone. So literally every marriage runs its course in sports. It is what it is. It gets stale unless you're like Nick Saban, like you're going to get run out of town eventually. So, winning is important, but also I think something to keep in mind with Stoops. He is, I believe, 56, and that family, his father was a coach. He passed away at a young age from a heart attack. His brother decided to hang it up young, just knowing the health history. And I think something to watch with him, with how fed up he is with everything. If it kind of just expires on him at Kentucky, or 2, it keeps going well at Kentucky, but he's interested in going elsewhere and that opportunity doesn't arise, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a candidate to hang it up early too. So it's going to be, I think, honestly, we're on a year-to-year watch with him. I wouldn't be surprised if he's here for 3 more years. I wouldn't be surprised if this is it. And then John Summerall, I think, is the name we're all waiting for to come here eventually. Former linebacker and former inside linebackers coach at Kentucky before he was at Troy. I mean, that was the guy they were going to hire if he left for A&M. I could tell.
Aaron, you read my mind. I was about to say, but you guys will be. I mean, Kentucky will be fine because John Summerall's a hell of a coach.
Yeah. And that was the guy there. Like I can report that with 100% certainty.
It was like that time Billy Donovan was going to leave and take the Magic job, and they had Anthony Grant teed up to come take that Florida basketball job. Then years later, Donovan left, and they did not hire Anthony.
They did. That's right.
And Summerall's at Tulane now, for those that don't know. He's at Troy, and then turned Troy completely around, won the Sun Belt. We've talked about
that 1 year too.
Yeah,
and all that.
They're like 22-4 or something under him in 2 years.
I'll bounce this off you. Here's a theory I've had about Mark Stoops for a while. All those Stoops boys went to Iowa and played for Hayden Fry.
I know where
none of them have ever taken that job. Kirk Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz was struggling on offense. I mean, offensive football is passed that bad by. They made him fire his son, and he hired a worse version of his son, I think.
They scored 40 points.
But look, yeah, but you understand how bad the Redbirds of Illinois State are.
Yeah,
my wife went there. I watch them frequently. They're terrible. Me and Phil could start for them right now. So I've always thought, if you're Iowa, you kind of know the formula. That's kind of Mark Stoops' formula. You run the ball, you play defense.
Absolutely.
I think he would probably make a better coordinator hire. You're in the Big Ten. He's great at evaluating players and finding talent, which Iowa is. It's his alma mater. I know the weather sucks, but Iowa's played a lot of winning football, and you got to know that plays on the heartstrings. Now, he may not want, and I don't know what their NIL situation is at Iowa. I think they do okay.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons he was going to go to A&M, and I don't think it was A&M. I think A&M got Greg Schiano'd in a way. I think absolutely. Rossby. I think it doesn't leak like that to people.
No.
And media like yourself if it's not done or close to, or it's okay to leak it. And I think the guys with the 10-gallon hats done this. Well, you can't. Why don't you just hire Elko instead of Stoops? Lost 58 games. Never mind, it's at Kentucky.
And if they made that move after 2021, the fans would have loved it too.
Never mind, the last head football coach they hired from Kentucky. Last I checked, he was one of the best in the history of college football. That would be Bear Bryant.
He was pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't understand it, but and I think Stoops is better than Elko.
I think Bear would deal with the portal.
He'd have 150 guys on his roster.
I think he'd know how to give. I think he'd know how to deal with NIL. He went to Alabama.
We're going to pass the head around. Mama called. But no, so I think that's my theory on Stoops. But you're absolutely right. Kentucky football, people think once Stoops leaves, it's going to go backward. If Summerall is the guy, if somebody else doesn't snatch him.
Right. That's the key.
You gotta be careful. And you watch Tulane this year. I think he is a hell of a football coach. And I thought the same thing. I said, everybody's dancing because Stoops, he's going to go to A&M, but that's going to make A&M better. And then Kentucky's going to get this breath of fresh air because that guy's really good.
Yeah, and he played here, and if he had been the hire at that point, he actually recruited a lot of guys that were on this roster, so they would have been able to keep a handful of guys as well. But no, I think Iowa's definitely, no doubt about it, the job all of us on the beat have talked about. If that comes open, we're all just going to be on our phones monitoring and waiting for that announcement. Honestly, like that is his alma mater. He's a Midwest guy, being from Ohio. It makes perfect sense. I mean, at this point in time, he definitely would have to investigate the NIL situation. Like I said, the health situation, with his family history and his age, but that is definitely the job. Really the only jobs over the years that, it feels like he's on every hot board, right? He was on Florida's hot boards when they hired Napier. He was on LSU's hot boards when they fired Orgeron. But really the only I'd say 3 jobs Iowa, if it ever came open, when Florida State opened and he met with a booster from there up in Cincinnati, you had to actually take that into account. He was obviously the defensive coordinator there under Jimbo, and then the Texas A&M stuff. So those are the only 3 jobs I've ever honestly had given any much thought to, and had to do much reporting or research on. But yeah, if that Iowa job opens up, that's going to be very, very enticing for him. No doubt about it. I mean, they played Iowa in back-to-back bowl games, and he definitely, you don't get him to open up too much on like sentimental things, but he opens up about the hockey.
The Citrus Bowl was fine, but that Music City Bowl set off
the worst game I've ever covered in my career.
I mean, whoa, bro.
I wish I could. Nashville's a great city, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Go there a lot, covering Kentucky, SEC tournament, Vandy, whatever it is. But I wish I can get those 4 days back because it was a brutal event.
21-0 for anybody that needs a reminder.
21-0, 2 pick sixes for Iowa, 1 offensive touchdown all game.
Hoping for more than 1 offensive touchdown in Saturday's ball game. Unlike final question for me here, man. Unlike South Carolina, Kentucky keeps Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida on their schedule this year. Gamecocks don't play any of them. It does look like the SEC is kind of leaning into the Wildcats and South Carolina becoming a little bit more of a rivalry. It certainly wasn't one for a while, and then Kentucky really got it going in that winning streak, and if that changed things. Gamecocks have won 3 or 4 now, and they feel like they've, got it back where they want it. But there's been a little bit of nastiness between these fan bases and these programs. How is it viewed up there? How do people up there? What do they think about South Carolina?
Yeah, I don't think the two coaches like each other very much. They're not going to admit it publicly, but I think, I've heard things privately. I think you guys probably heard things privately. There's a clashing there for sure. The fan base, I think the biggest thing for them is they expect to win this game. Like you said, Kentucky won, what was it, 5 or 6 in a row, and then 6 or 7, or 7 to 8, whatever it was. And so every time they see South Carolina on the schedule, nothing personal, but they expect to win that game just because they've done it. Yeah. And, they 2022 without Will Levis, they played terrible. It didn't happen. And then last year was the game, I think, infuriated fans, infuriated the coaching staff, the players, because South Carolina had a rough year last year, 5-7 campaign. The defense played really well at the end of the year, but had only had one really good game before the Kentucky game, so Kentucky was expecting that to be a game to kind of get the offense right. Defense did what they were supposed to do outside of those third downs, and they lose that game on the road, and it set the fans off. So I think this game, being at home this early in the year, knowing what it means to kind of set up where you want to go in the season, this fan base is going to be all in on this week. They want this one, as I wouldn't say as bad as any on the schedule, because they want that Tennessee and Louisville game more than anyone on the schedule, if we're being honest. But South Carolina is probably up there with in the next round of games they really, really want to get. And look, I think for both teams to have the season they want to have, they need to win this game. I think both of them probably think it's a winnable game, and rightfully so. And if they lose it and they look at who else is on their schedule, it probably gets more daunting and more, oh boy, like what's our path to this number of wins. So, it's just a crucial game for both sides. And I honestly think both teams are going to show up, and it's going to be a competitive one. That is one thing too that makes this kind of a rivalry, is not in most of these games, even no matter who's won them, they've been super competitive, and they've come down to the fourth quarter. So, hopefully we'll get more of the same of that. That's always when football's at its best.
Yeah, it's a neat setup for the weekend, as the only league game being played between league opponents, of course, 3:30 on ABC. SEC Nation will be in town. Marty and McGee will be in town. Sean McDonough and Greg McElroy, they'll have it on national television. And then to your point, following that, for South Carolina, they've got LSU at home, and then they have Akron, but then the rest of the SEC games, Ole Miss, at Bama, at Oklahoma. You're right. You want to try to get off on a good foot here. Same thing with Kentucky. If they get beat, they welcome the Dogs next weekend. Then they got to go to Ole Miss after playing Ohio.
Yes.
And you could be staring 0-3 in the face if you get beat on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. Woo. Yeah. That's why this game for both sides, man, it's as close to a must win on September 7th as you can get.
Yeah, there's no question, man. I sure am glad that I reached out. You're really good at this, and we appreciate you spending the time with us. If we can ever, in any way, shape, or form, give back from the Carolina side, please let us know. We'd love to have you back. Basketball season's right around the corner. It's gonna be a little interesting up there this hoop season.
It is. It's gonna be different. I'm very, as a media member, I'm very excited. Let's just put it that way. I'm excited to talk to a coach that's gonna talk to me. So that'll be good.
That makes a difference. Do your job. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, no.
Arkansas come to town, don't they? Didn't Arkansas come to town?
They do come to town February 1st. That is.
What do you think that's going to be like?
Must see TV. I think he's gonna hear it this year. I think over time heals all wounds. I mean, Rick Pitino is the most hated man in Lexington. Now they're honoring him next year when St. John's comes here. Not this season, but next season. I think Cal will have that moment 5 to 10 years from now. But it's going to be, with the way he kind of mailed it in at the end, the way they lost in those tournaments and SEC tournament, NCAA tournament, he's going to be in for it. I think Mark Pope's a really nice guy, and probably I wouldn't be surprised if he has a message the day before, like, hey, let's show him respect. I don't think it's going to work. So I think he's going to hear it this year.
I'm sure that game's going to be prime time.
Yeah.
So we'll look for that TV schedule to be out here pretty shortly. Hey, dude, really appreciate it. Enjoy the ball game this weekend. 72 and sunny in Lexington on Saturday.
Way better than lightning every 5 seconds. So looking forward to it.
Catspaws.com. Aaron Gershon, man, he's really good. For the other side, go check out the Wildcats there. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Yes, sir. Really good stuff. Good insight there on pretty much everything